So you know a little bit about joining here and everything, and being here 16 years. But to say that and to realize that was actually the experience, or two completely different things. I didn't expect to feel so emotional. I've been back since I left, but just coming and remembering, I was telling some of our devotees that almost all of the brothers that were here when I joined are gone. Only one may still be living. And you realize time, what it does, that everything is different, everything's the same. That we look back and it was just like the time just flew by, and at the same time it feels like it was a different lifetime. So it was a very interesting experience, and just remembering all the paintings that I see, I remember Swami Atmajnanananda. And really, when I joined here, I thought I died and went to heaven. I fell in love with Trabuco, and I left after 16 years only because I was not given much choice. This new center was starting in Washington, D.C., and Swami Swahanandaji, who was my Gurudev, he asked me to go, and I couldn't say no, but it was really hard for me to leave because I just fell in love with this place and everything that it stood for. And when I look and see some of the old-timers that are here, see Mahadev and Sarame, I look at them and I remember all of their children, the 3 children. I saw them all in the hospital when they were born. And now they're all married and have big careers and they're having their own children and everything. And my topic is Maya, by the way. and this is a much better explanation of the real meaning of Maya than anything I'm going to say. And just how time plays these tricks on us, and how we turn around and the whole lifetime is gone. We look in the mirror, we think, who is this old person looking back at me? But life becomes so much richer because of all of these experiences. So I'm very happy to be here, and filled with different types of emotions. I went back and saw the room that I stayed in for those 16 years, and the monk who lived next door to me, I see him, I went into his room, and all these emotions came flooding back. So anyhow, I don't want to get too emotional, but I'll be talking tonight about Maya. And is this being recorded?
Yes, Swami.
Oh, are you going to show it to people?
Yes.
Oh.
But if you want.
I don't care, but I was happy to know that it wasn't live streaming or anything like that.
No.
I like informal things. If anybody has a question or anything, don't.
If it's good, we would upload it on YouTube.
Yeah, no. Then we'll make it bad, and you don't have to put it on YouTube. All these things being recorded and everything, they take the spontaneity away a little bit. For me, at least. Well, I don't care. You can if you want to record it. Hello, everyone. That's okay. Okay, I'm going to start with a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. This is a very famous verse about Maya. Devi Yesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya Mameva Ye Prapadyante Mayam Etam Tarantite. Verily, this divine illusion of mine, this divine Maya, made up of the 3 gunas, is difficult to cross over. They alone cross over this illusion who take refuge in me. Now, this concept of Maya is a very slippery concept. We think we have a hold of it and it slips right through our fingers. It's very difficult to understand. And if we understand the concept of Maya, that has nothing to do with understanding the phenomenon of Maya. The phenomenon of Maya and the concept of Maya are 2 completely different things. We can easily understand some of these philosophical ideas, and we'll go through them and everything. But what Maya is, where it comes from, how it can disappear, how it can cause this universe to come into existence, there's no explanation for these things. This is why this idea of Maya is some type of magic or some type of mystery. It's probably the best way of understanding it. But still, there are a lot of different philosophical interpretations and ways of understanding this Maya. We'll go through some of these things a little bit. But the first thing that we have to understand is that we can dance around the concept and we can think we understand it, but by definition, it can't be understood. By definition. This is the very nature of Maya, that it's neither real nor unreal, and we can't deny it because we see the effects of it, and we can't prove it, and as soon as we think that we've proven it, it'll disappear on us. If it can disappear, then it's not real. So it's, as I say, it's such an interesting concept, and it has a very important role to play in Vedanta. But we make a big mistake if we think that it's going to explain things, because it doesn't really explain anything. So we get this definition: Sad Asat Vilakshana. It can't be described as either Sat, something real, or something Asat, something unreal. It somehow sneaks in between these two concepts. There's a nice Sanskrit verse that says, Avidyaya avidyatvam idam evitu lakshanam yat pramana sahishnutvam anyatha vastu sa bhavet. This avidya is the same as Maya. Maya is one of the ways we understand it. It's some type of ignorance, primal ignorance or even individual ignorance. And this says that what is the lakshana? What is the definitive feature of ignorance? The fact that it can't be understood. Avidyatvam. Avidyatvam. And it can't bear the light of any pramana. We have different pramanas, which are ways of telling if something is true or not. Something is real or something is true. We have these different pramanas. It can't stand the light of any of them. If we try to prove the existence of it, it'll kind of slip away. We have in Vedantic system 3 main pramanas. The school of Vedanta will expand it to 6, but 3 main ones. And one is called pratyaksha. So how do we know something is real? We say, well, I saw it. This is pratyaksha. And we have anumana, inference. So how do I know it's raining out? Well, somebody walked in and they're soaking wet. I draw the conclusion. I'll assume that it's raining. Then we have shabda, that someone is a meteorologist, and they said, yes, it's raining. So an authority is there. So this can work in a positive way and a negative way. So suppose we hear a noise outside, and we think, oh, maybe a thief has come. So we go outside and we look around, we don't see anyone. Pratyaksha. So we can't assume that there was a thief. Then we say, are there any footprints? Maybe a thief came and went away and left some sign. We say there are no footprints. Then we ask our neighbor, you've been sitting outside on your porch and looking out, did you see anybody come? They say no. So then we assume by authority and by inference and by direct perception that there was no thief. But still, that doubt is there and a little fear is there. We still think that, somebody, maybe they snuck around, somebody didn't see them, they were very careful, possible that they're still there. So this is this strange phenomenon with Maya, is that logically we can't really prove that it doesn't exist or that it does exist. It's this very gray territory that we have. And but it's used to explain things. This is the odd thing. We can't prove that it's something real, and yet it helps explain things that we can't explain otherwise. Philosophically, it sounds like not a very good tactic. Huh? that we're trying to see. But if we understand the difficulty that the philosophers have, especially they want to start out and say Brahman alone is real, they want to say that Brahman is unchanging, that Brahman is actionless, all of that, how do we account for anything? So we need something to come up with and to explain from the cosmic point of view how the one becomes the many, how this transcendent Brahman becomes this immanent universe, how, and from the individual point of view, how the oneself appears to be so many different individual human beings. So we come up with this concept of Maya. And if we look at the way Sri Ramakrishna understands this, all of these types of questions, how we explain these things, he's very, very clear that the human mind is incapable of understanding these things. Almost a priori, almost by definition, is like pouring, he says, 5 seers of milk into a 1 seer container. When we try to figure out these things, how this universe came into existence, these different types, is it beginningless? Did it have a beginning in time? All of these things, impossible. Now, we may think if we had a great mind and it were large enough, it could contain all of the milk. But it doesn't matter how large it is, it can't do it. It's something inherent about this Maya question, that it's like saying, if only I were faster, I could run away from my shadow. If I could spin around fast enough, I could see the back of my head. We think that this is, if only I were a little smarter, I could understand this Maya. If we say that somebody's so strong that he can lift anything, then we say, can you lift yourself off the ground? It doesn't matter how strong we are, we can't do it. So there's some inherent impossibility of understanding these things because we're doing it through this finite mind, and these are questions that go beyond all of that. I want to read another verse, just a line from a verse. This is also quoted very often. It's achintya kuluye bhava datang starkena yojayet. Achintya is something that can't be fathomed. It is beyond our ability to understand. He said, for those things that are achintya, the tongue don't even try to apply logic to them. So this Maya is something that we simply can't understand with this logical mind. And yet we'll see that somehow it serves a very important purpose, and we can get a sense of it, especially when it comes to the individual level. This cosmic level, forget about it. This we use this term Maya to help us understand something that we don't understand. But on the individual level, we'll find that it's something very, very helpful. So this is why we have this concept of Maya, because the human mind does not want to admit that there are things that we can't understand. That we think if only we were smarter, we could understand it. This is something that is just inherent in the human mind, that we can't accept the idea that there's not a valid answer to a question. You know, the question of what came first, the chicken or the egg. When we were kids, we used to hear this, but it actually goes back to the ancient Greeks. It was a real question, not just a children's riddle. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Now, if we say that the egg came first, then we say, well, how do you get an egg without a chicken? If we say the chicken came first, how do you have a chicken without an egg? This is that infinite regress, the cause and the effect, each trying to explain each other. And if we say that there was never a time when there wasn't a chicken preceding the egg or an egg preceding the chicken, there's also a fallacy, a logical fallacy, the infinite regress. Now, can the mind accept the fact that of these three, not one of the three is a valid answer? Can we accept that? It's very hard, huh? We think it had to be one way or the other. So we have different concepts, the uncaused cause, that there was an original chicken. Huh? There was an original chicken that just came into existence. Huh? And I hate to say this, but this is the answer we get mostly in Vedanta, that from beginningless time it's been going on. It's actually a logical fallacy. And those who really like this concept of Maya, they'll also accept the fact that even that's not a real answer, that there's no real answer. But the human mind wants an answer. You all know who Agatha Christie was? Mm-hmm. Great writer of mystery novels. Mm-hmm. So imagine, she wrote something, Murder on the Orient Express. Lots of different things. So everybody's on the same train, there's a murder. And there are half a dozen people who had a motive, that each one had a reason for committing the murder, but each one has an airtight alibi. Now, can we accept the fact that each one of them was incapable of doing it? We have a dead body. Right? So we think it has to be, one of them had to have done it. It had to be one way or the other. Now, some will say that if this world is then just like a dream, there's no reality to it, then we can think maybe. Suppose we go to Agatha Christie, and she hasn't finished the novel. We say, who was the real murderer? She'll say, I don't know, I haven't decided yet. Huh? But if we take this world as real, then it had to have happened. Somebody had to have done it. So it's very hard for us to say that the fact that this universe, we don't know how it started, does that mean that there's no possible logical answer about how it started? And yet that seems to be the case. And so what do we say? Maya. We say Maya. When I was a college student, I had to read all this Western philosophy. This Immanuel Kant. He wrote a very, very long, boring book called The Critique of Pure Reason. And he goes to great pains to show that some of these questions, did the world have a beginning or no beginning? That if you take one position, you can prove that the opposite leads to a logical, what's the word? Not to, fallacy. And if you take the other side, it leads to a fallacy. Now both, if you only have two options, both can't be fallacies. So he concludes that the human mind is not capable of understanding these things. That is beyond that. Now we'll have this Gaudapada. He was a proponent of something called Ajatavada, that he'll say, well, then it really is just like a dream. Then let's not say that there was anything real about it. If there's nothing real about it, we don't have to account for the beginning of it. So let's assume that this is a dream. And that somebody says that, who made this chair? Huh? Well, how do we answer a question like that? I'm dreaming the chair. Unless I dream that somebody made it, then nobody made it. Huh? If we're reading a novel and the character is in the novel, and we know everything about the character, and somebody says, well, who was this character's grandfather? He said, well, it's not in the book. Now, could he exist without a grandfather? We can't exist without a grandfather, but it's fiction. So they'll conclude that this is old fiction somehow. It doesn't help much, because then, even if it's a dream, how does this infinite absolute Brahman come to dream? So what's the answer we give? Maya. Huh? Maya. So this is really a way of deluding ourselves into thinking that we've explained something just by giving a term to it. And I'll give 3 examples. Suppose a small child asks a very good question to the parents, that why is it that when water gets colder and colder and colder, then when it reaches 32 degrees, that it turns into ice? It's a good question, right? So what is the answer that the parent will give? That's the freezing point of water, 32 degrees. Huh? That's how it happens. And then they say, well, how does this caterpillar turn into a butterfly? Huh? Good, easy explanation. It's called a metamorphosis. So that's how it happens. Or, say, plants. How is it that they get some sustenance from the sunlight that can actually feed them somehow? Photosynthesis. Huh? So then we think we've understood. Now the scientists will know a little bit more, but ultimately they'll also come to a point where they just put a term on it because they don't know how it happens. So this is more or less what we do with Maya. We give a technical term to something to cover up the fact that we don't understand it. Yeah. And this is Maya. So we also ask these questions that the children ask. How does the one become the many? How does the transcendent become the immanent? How does this actionless transcendent Brahman, how does that somehow turn into this universe or project this universe or create this universe? How does it do it? With the help of Maya. So what have we learned from that? Huh? If we really think about it very deeply, if we're very thoughtful, we'll realize that we don't know any more about it than we did before, except now we can say that something mysterious. There's something that we can't really account for. And we'll start to move into a little bit of a different territory that maybe we have to think of this Maya as a type of power. And now we get into this idea of Shakti, that this is some type of power, because even the non-dualist, who really, see, these non-dualists, they're very protective of Brahman. They don't want any stain on Brahman. They don't want anybody to say, oh, Brahman has Maya within it. It can't. It's perfect. And they don't want to say that Maya is something separate, because Brahman alone exists. Brahman alone is real. So they're very protective. They don't want to see any stain on this Brahman. So they'll come up with this Maya is there within Brahman, but it doesn't affect it like the venom inside the snake. It's a poison for everybody else, but the snake is fine. The snake isn't affected by that. Or they'll say that once we know the real nature of Maya, it disappears. So we don't have to account for something that was never real. If it disappears, it was never real to begin with. These are a little bit of sleight of hand, philosophical sleight of hand, a little bit. They're good answers, of course, but if we're really honest with ourselves, we have to go back to this idea that there's something mysterious at the heart of creation, that I sometimes think how foolish we are, that we don't know how ordinary things work. We don't know how a toaster works. Huh? So there's so many simple things that we can figure out how this universe came into existence. Huh? It's really, really a very strange thing, and yet we think that we should be able to do it. So what we learned from all of this is that the Advaitin finds himself in trouble. That the Brahman alone is real, and we have no second way of explaining anything, so we bring in this concept of Maya, that is some type of power. So I was saying that even the Advaitin has to admit that this, or explain this Maya or Vidya in terms of different types of power. That this Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti, we have these two terms. That first, the real nature of Brahman has to be covered over somehow, and then some superimposition takes place. If we think of it on the individual level, Maya works better on the individual level, then it makes a lot of sense. But this true nature of the self is covered over. I don't know the true nature of the self. And this, what's superimposed is this idea of body and mind and personality and ego and everything. So even the Advaitin has to bring in a little bit of this idea of Shakti. We can understand Maya in one other way. Now we're getting more to the individual. That if we look at some of these questions, these big questions, and our understanding of things, we find that there's a little dilemma there. That the basic truths of Vedanta we can look upon as truth. We can accept that. But they're equally important and stronger things what we can call facts. And they're the exact opposite of the truth. So we have the truth on the one hand and the fact on the other hand. So the truth is Brahman alone is real, and this world is mithya. It's a passing show. It doesn't have that same reality to it. This is the ultimate truth of Vedanta. The ultimate fact of our existence is that we take this world to be 100% real. And there's Brahman, some hazy concept. We don't know exactly what it is or anything like that. Then, second main truth is that the individual self is pure consciousness and one with that Brahman. This is the truth. The fact of the matter is that we're 100% identified with this, our individuality. I may say, I know I'm not this body, but still I feel that I dwell within it. And that there's separation and we're all individuals and everything. So that's the fact. This is sometimes called the human condition. The existential literature, they talk about that, this human condition. We don't know where we came from, what we're doing. We find ourselves, we turn around, we find ourselves living and existing. We don't know the past, we don't know the future. We read about these ideas, they appeal to us and everything, but the fact is that we're chickens with a head cut off. We're running around, we don't know exactly what we're doing. And why? Maya. So this is the answer that we get because of Maya. Okay, now I want to look at this a little bit more from this, what we call this human condition. And here again, we find ourselves covered with some type of ignorance. We have some deep sense of ourselves as somehow transcending all of the change in life. We all have that. We all know that somehow there's a continuity of existence, that we're the same person we were when we were small children. And at the same time, we know that we're completely different. We're completely different people than what we were when we were very young. So we recognize that there's some ultimate basic truth to this Vedantic idea that the self is changeless. Everybody recognizes that deep down within, that in the midst of all the change, everything that's taken place, I'm the same person. I'm a different person completely, but the same person. I remember everything that took place, through all of these intervening years and everything. I'm the same person that I was when I joined in Trabuco, 41 years ago. And yet I'm a different person. But when I say I'm a different person, I don't confuse myself with anybody else sitting here. Different person, just my mind has changed, my understanding. I've grown a little bit, body has changed, everything else has changed. But this false identification with all of these external things, this is what's meant by avidya, or Maya, from this individual point of view. Okay, now let me go back a little bit. I want to talk about this idea, how this infinite absolute Brahman can be understood if we accept this idea of Maya as Shakti, a little bit of power, how we can understand possibly how it works and how this Maya works. We very often hear of the illustration that Maya is like the sun. And the sun is self-luminous. It doesn't require any other light. It's self-luminous. It illumines everything else, including itself. And it's changeless, that light. And does light have any color? The light of the sun? Invisible. Light is invisible. If it had any color, then we wouldn't know the color of things. If you put a filter on light, a red filter, everything will look red. We can say we know the real color of something because there's no filter on it. So light itself has no color, but it allows us to see all colors. So this, even Ramakrishna talked about that in one place, that it has no color of its own. But because of that, it allows all possible color. Now, if we say that this is the sum and substance of light, that it's invisible, it has no color of its own, then we're missing the fact that it contains all of the colors of the rainbow. If we have this, what do they call it? Prism. Thank you. See, I've reached the age where I'm allowed to forget words. Yeah, I can ask for help for these things. If it goes through a prism, then we see that invisible light, colorless light, contained within it all possible colors. So now we're getting some other idea that Brahman if it's like the sun, that it contains within it all possible variety. And what is this prism? Maya. So when Brahman goes through this prism of Maya, on the other side, all variety is there, and yet the sun hasn't changed at all. Now, we can go a little bit further and say that the same sun, it provides not just light, but warmth and heat and food. We talked about photosynthesis before. So now we're getting a little bit more of this idea of Shakti, and we start to understand how Sri Ramakrishna is his worldview. Because for him, that now we're talking about Saguna Brahman. For him, they're one and the same. Nirguna Brahman, they're not two separate things. Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman. Or Swami Swanandaji, he always used to give the example of a woman who gives birth to a child and becomes a mother. Now, are they two different people, the woman and the mother? The same person. Before the birth of the child, she's only a woman, but the potential to be a mother is there the whole time. After she gives birth and becomes a woman, and becomes a mother, still a woman. The woman part is always there. That can be, we can't explain anything without that part always being there. Or take another example. When we go to sleep, then we're a sleeper. When we dream, then there's also the dreamer. Or the sleeper and the dreamer are two different people. So the sleeper, there's always the potential for the dream to emerge out of the sleeper. And it's there whether there's a dream or not. Either it's manifest or unmanifest. But we can't imagine that there is a dreamer without a sleeper. We have to be sleeping. So this Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman, they both have to be there. Nirguna Brahman, this sleeper, that's always there and unchanging. The sleeper doesn't wake up. Sleeper is always there, unchanging, that's always there. But the Saguna aspect, that it belongs to one and the same reality. This is what Sri Ramakrishna calls Shakti, or Kali, or Mahamaya, or the Divine Mother. So now we start to see how this idea of Maya, it can even be personified into a Divine Mother, worshipping God as Mother. Why worship God as Mother? Because it explains creation. The child comes out of the very body of the mother. The father has a role to play, but not the essential critical role. It's the mother. So this is why mother worship is so popular in India, and it makes so much sense. So Sri Ramakrishna liked that. He liked this idea that Brahman and Shakti are abheda. Now he uses this term abheda. We have two ways of understanding this. That if we take Shakti as that power, then they're inseparable. If we take Shakti as meaning Saguna Brahman together with its power, then they're identical. Abheda then means identical. They're one and the same. So when Narendra, or Swami Vivekananda, he hated this idea of Mother Kali when he first went to Sri Ramakrishna. He used to say that, oh, how I hated this Mother Kali. Later, of course, he became a great devotee of Mother Kali. And Sri Ramakrishna used to say to him, but don't you understand that what you call a Brahman, I call Kali. Don't think of this Kali as some mad woman with the swords and all of this and bloody. That's also one aspect, that Divine Mother is responsible for everything in this world, good and bad. But from this higher point of view, it's recognizing the fact that this infinite, absolute, transcendent Brahman contains within it this mysterious power, which we call Maya or Shakti, which helps us understand a little bit how this process of projection and creation can take place. How do we understand the emergence of the dream from the sleeper? Sleeper's sleeping. Sleeper can't decide, well, now let me dream. Of course, Upanishads give us that. The Brahman looks around and says, one day, let me become many, Bahusyam. This is an allegory, and we don't take this very literally. But somehow this dream, when we're sleeping, it just emerges. It just emerges. What is it that causes that to emerge? Maya. Yeah. So we we have our way of trying to understand all of these different things. So this is what we do. We use this term Maya. Now, when we get to a very practical side of all of this, and we start to examine our lives, and we start to examine the nature of time, and the nature of self, the nature of ego. This will go back to what I started tonight's talk with, that experience of the unreality of things based on the fleeting nature of time. We have this term, mithya, this Jagat mithya, that we find used all of the time by this one school of Advaita Vedanta that likes to look upon this world as somehow unreal. Now, there are many different ways of understanding this. One simple way is to say that anything that is changeful doesn't meet that high standard of reality. Others will say, no, it's really some projection of mind and everything. That'll be the other extreme side of it. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he always talked about the unreal nature of the world in terms of anitya, that it's fleeting, that this world is fleeting by, that nothing is permanent. Now, I've often thought about this, that what does it mean when we say the impermanence of the world? What does it mean? Now, we may say that, well, everything in this world will end one day. Now, let's speculate a little. Let's assume that we live in a world where everything is permanent. These chairs that we're sitting on, all of this, that these will always be here exactly the way they are right now. None of that will ever change. No decay, nothing like that. This idea of anitya is not affected because we're the ones who are fleeting. It's this awareness of time that's going by, and there's this whole memory and aging process and everything, and the fact that we'll leave everything behind, whether it's permanent or impermanent, it doesn't make any difference. We're going to leave it behind. So this impermanent nature of this world, anitya, this refers to us. That there's nothing that we can hold on to in this external universe. This physical body or possessions or anything like that. But part of this Maya is that we keep looking for external things to hold on to because we're unaware of that treasure within. And this is the good side of all of this. If we understand the impermanent nature of the world, we understand the inability of the world to satisfy us. And we understand that whatever we need, we carry within us. And we're simply looking in the wrong direction for everything. Then we understand that this idea of Maya is only half of the story. That there's the impermanent nature of the world, mysterious nature of the world. All of that doesn't take away from the fact that we have that divine essence within us, that there's something within us that's changeless, there's something within us that is ever content, something within us that will fulfill all of our needs and all of our desires and bring great joy to our lives. So this is that positive side of it. But this other side of Maya, this fleeting nature of the world, this is something that sometimes we really feel it very deeply. This is the experience I had when I came here. Looking around and seeing things that, I spend a lot of my time here in the wood shop. And I see a lot of the things that I made here. Some of them look good. Other things that were so nice and neat and shiny and everything are all falling apart. And there's just this play of time. So this play of time is itself Maya. Sri Ramakrishna gives two interesting definitions. He'll say that this ego is Maya, because we identify with all these false things, and time is also Maya. I want to read a story that Swamiji tells, and I don't remember if it's Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga. Anyhow, this story of Narada. A legend tells how once Narada said to Krishna, "Lord, show me Maya." A few days passed away, and Krishna asked Narada to make a trip with him towards a desert. And after walking for several miles, Krishna said, "Narada, I am thirsty. Can you fetch some water for me?" "I will go at once, sir, and get your water." So Narada went. At a little distance there was a village. He entered the village in search of water and knocked at a door, which was opened by a most beautiful young girl. At the sight of her, he immediately forgot that his master was waiting for water, perhaps dying for the want of it. He forgot everything and began to talk with the girl. That's also Maya. All that day he did not return to his master. The next day he was again at the house talking to the girl. One meaning of Maya is attachment, by the way. That talk ripened into love. He asked the father for the daughter, and they were married and lived there and had children. Thus 12 years passed. His father-in-law died. He inherited his property. He lived, as he seemed to think, a very happy life with his wife and children, his fields and his cattle and so forth. Then came a flood. One night the river rose until it overflowed its banks and flooded the whole village. Houses fell, men and animals were swept away and drowned, and everything was floating in the rush of the stream. Narada had to escape. With one hand he held his wife, and with the other two of his children. Another child was on his shoulders, and he was trying to ford the tremendous flood. After a few steps, he found the current was too strong, and the child on his shoulders fell and it was borne away. A cry of despair came from Narada. In trying to save that child, he lost his grip upon one of the others, and it was also lost. At last his wife, whom he clasped with all his might, was torn away by the current, and he was thrown on the bank, weeping and wailing in bitter lamentation. Behind him there came a gentle voice. "My child, where is the water? You went to fetch a pitcher of water, and I'm waiting for you. You've been gone for quite half an hour." Half an hour, Narada exclaimed. 12 whole years had passed through his mind, and all these scenes had happened in half an hour. And this is Maya. So we can really forget about all these very high philosophical ideas and how this Maya explains this universe, or doesn't explain it, but this time itself and how this life is fleeting, and just the whole concept of time. I often ask myself, and now I'm almost 74 years old, I often ask myself, how long did those 74 years take? It's an interesting question, huh? How long did it take? I look back, and it just went like that. So this is life, and this is Maya. Everything is fleeting. Everything is being swept away by this flood of time. Everything gets chewed up. We read in chapter 11, Gita, this fantastic idea that everything is being crushed and swallowed and chewed and spit out by time. This when Arjuna asked Sri Krishna, who are you? This world destroying and all of these things. He said, I am Kala. I am time. And this is Maya. That if we want to get a feeling of Maya, we don't have to talk about this world as an illusion or anything. Just think of it in terms of time, where everything goes just like that. That one day we're small children, the next day we're teenagers, and it just goes one thing after another. And one day we'll find that the last day of our lives. So this is Maya, but we're more than that. This is the great thing, that we're the witness of all of this. We're eternal. We've always existed. This Maya is just a covering. That this is not our real nature. So anyhow, this story of Narada, really it's everybody's story. That we all will have this experience, that we'll look back and think that, yes, it does seem like half an hour. It seemed like 12 years, of course. But once it's gone, once in the middle of it seems like forever. Once it's gone, then it seems like it went just like that. So Swamiji says this is Maya. And this is why it's so hard to transcend Maya, because we cling to everything. We want everything to be permanent. And we want everything to come immediately into the senses. Sri Ramakrishna tells the story when Vishnu incarnated himself as a pig and had to destroy some demon, and then afterwards is wallowing in the mud with all the little piglets and perfectly happy and everything, and doesn't want to go back to heaven. He's perfectly happy wallowing in the mud. And then the other gods are thinking, well, what will happen? Vishnu has to come back. So then Shiva says, okay, I'll go. And Shiva with his trident. First of all, he tries to convince him. Vishnu says, no, I'm very happy. And then with his trident, he pierces the body of the pig, and Vishnu, laughing, goes back. Ha ha ha. That he had forgotten himself because of this Maya, but then he knew his real nature ultimately. Now, how do we overcome this Maya? Of course, we first try to understand it. And understanding it, then we understand the power of it. And we understand that this human mind doesn't have the strength to simply say that, no, I won't let these things attract me, that everything is impermanent, that I'll only stay established in my real nature. We're too weak for that. So what does Sri Ramakrishna say? He says, take refuge in the Divine Mother. You remember the verse that I read in the beginning? This divine Maya of mine is difficult to cross over. Then he says, only those who take refuge in me, they cross beyond this Maya. So Sri Ramakrishna, he says, take refuge in the Divine Mother, that we're to propitiate the Divine Mother. So that's his formula, that this ego will not die, so we let this ego exist. We don't fight it. If the scent of I is there, and the scent of I is the cause of limitation, then he says, then let this rascal remain with a relationship with God, as a child of God, as a servant of God. Look upon God as the Divine Mother, and then yourself as a child, and let that ego be helpful. Instead of that ego that is always trying to fulfill itself, satisfy itself with the external things. So we have the way that the jnani will do it. The jnani will take this ego that I am that infinite absolute reality. I have everything I need. I'm the witness of everything. Already perfect. That'll be the jnani. But the bhakta will say that I am a servant of God. I'm a child of God. Have some type of relationship. So this is the attitude that the jnani will take. This ego, expand this ego, so that it feels one with everything. This was, we say Swamiji did. He became so great, he could break through the net of Maya. And then the bhakta becomes so tiny. This ego, self-effacing, it can go through the meshes of Maya. And we have, Nag Mahashaya is the example that they give for that. What Sri Ramakrishna liked to, personally it was his particular attitude, and what he taught most of the devotees was to practice this sharanagati, surrender and acceptance. That we find ourselves in this human condition, there'll be suffering that comes from it, part of it is because of our false identification, but whatever it is, that we accept it and we take it as will of the mother. We take it as the will of the mother. If we're really good, we take it as mother's grace. Whatever happens, that the mother will not let anything bad happen to the child. This is the attitude of the baby kitten that Thakur talks about. Mother cat will put the kitten sometimes on the bed of the master, a very soft pillow, sometimes in the fireplace with the ashes. The kitten thinks, wherever my mother places me, it must be the best thing for me. So this is that sharanagati that Sri Ramakrishna talks about. He says in the Gospel, the jnani, follower of the path of knowledge, rejects Maya. It's not real. It's just ignorance. We'll get rid of it. The bhakta, however, devotee, does not ignore Maya. He worships Mahamaya. Taking refuge in her, he says, O mother, please stand aside from my path. Only if you step out of the way shall I have the knowledge of Brahman. The jnani explains away all three states, waking, dream, and deep sleep, but the bhakta accepts them all. As long as there is the ego, everything else exists. So long as the I exists, the bhakta sees that it is God who has become Maya, the universe, the living beings, and the 24 cosmic principles. And then he says later, one must propitiate the Divine Mother, the primal energy, in order to obtain God's grace. God himself is Mahamaya, who deludes the world with her delusion and conjures up the magic of creation, preservation, and destruction. She has spread this veil of ignorance before our eyes. We can go into the inner chamber only when she lets us pass through the door. Now, what happens when we transcend Maya? Does the universe disappear? If we go into that state of samadhi, for us it will seem to disappear. But what really happens, as Ramakrishna says, the universe is transformed. That we no longer see it as something to be afraid of. We no longer see it as the snake. We know that it's a rope. And we see it as the glory of the Divine Mother. We see everything as divine. We see the Divine Mother dwelling within all beings. We feel that oneness with everyone. That means we don't have any fear of anyone. No one is a stranger to us. Everything gets transformed when we can transcend Maya that way. Now, for the jnani, what is the experience of the jnani when this Maya disappears? I'm going to close with this. This is a beautiful letter that Swami Vivekananda wrote to Josephine MacLeod. He wrote so many beautiful letters. This is really one of the most beautiful ones. He says, I am drifting again with the bright, warm sun ahead and masses of vegetation around. And in the heat, everything is so still, so calm. And I'm drifting languidly in the warm heart of the river. I dare not make a splash with my hands or feet for fear of breaking the wonderful stillness that makes you feel sure it is an illusion. Oh, it is so calm. My thoughts seem to come from a great, great distance in the interior of my own heart. They seem like faint, distant whispers, and peace is upon everything. Sweet, sweet peace, like that one feels for a few moments just before falling into sleep, when things are seen and felt like shadows, without fear, without love, without emotion. Peace that one feels alone, surrounded with statues and pictures. The world is, but not beautiful or ugly, but as sensations without exciting any emotions. Oh, the blessedness of it. Everything is good. Om Tat Sat. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kashti Dukha Bhag Bhavet. May all beings be happy. May you all be free from disease. May you all realize only good things in life. May no one suffer. Om peace, peace, peace be unto all.